claptrap, but I mean, I appreciate your point of view.
John Robbie is attracting a strong following to his brand of shock radio. A former British Lion, Robbie dared to tour South Africa.
Is John Robbie's brand of shock radio a bright spark or a media dead end?
When he's not playing dead, David Grace, a federal agent in Pittsburgh. Ron Collins drives a bus. And Rick Granati studies psychology.
Are audiences ready for a remake of the world's most famous horror movie?
Net Revue Plus focuses on achievers and high flyers. In America, where fads are fast and furious, the last few years have seen a growing fascination with what they call talk radio, where a host sits at a phone and allows callers to have their say and then lashes back with a razor-like retort. Many people are dubious about it, and it has been redubbed shock radio or even schlock radio, but it has had an impact, sometimes as in the death of Alan Berg, the controversial talk show host who went too far for his conservative listeners and was murdered by them. It becomes a matter for real concern. Here in South Africa, the concept is being given a special energy by a burly Irishman who traded his rugby boots for a mic and has turned radio into a rough-and-ready scrum.
If you don't live on the Highveld, you might never have heard of him. He's been branded communist, lunatic, naive, and a threat to white South Africa.
We thought it was quite interesting at the big funeral that was held, the PAC funeral of Zef Motopeng, that there was a lot of trouble. And we had people who were involved who were at the funeral, and there were a lot of pressure there. There were a lot of insults being traded, a lot of threats and allegations being made.
They do not want to uplift themselves, do they?
All right, well, I mean, I think what you're talking is utter racist claptrap, but I mean, I appreciate your point of view.
John Robbie is attracting a strong following to his brand of shock radio. A former British Lion, Robbie dared to tour South Africa.
I came here because I lost my job in Ireland following the Irish rugby tour, and I basically came here because I was offered a job here.
Robbie did battle for Transvaal, then wrote a rugby autobiography which led him into sports journalism.
Pretty controversial. Most rugby autobiographies tend to tell you how many tries the guy scored and how many beers they had after the game. And John Robbie does talk a lot about that. But he was also concerned when he did the book to reveal a bit more about the inside parts of the game, particularly at boardroom level on Transvaal and selection battles and how they drop people. So, you know, there's quite a lot of controversy in it.
When you there's this terrible fear of failure, which is, as you get older and older, it's more and more terrifying. And I think that as you get to retirement, you look forward to the day when you haven't got that fear. And then once you've retired, you realize, in fact, that adrenaline, that fear was what the real drug was. That was what the attraction was. And I think a lot of sportsmen, when they give up, go through tremendous problems. I think, luckily, when the red light goes on for live radio, you get a similar sort of a buzz. So I think, in a way, I've been able to replace that fear and tension that I got from sport with radio. And I look upon myself as being very lucky.
A dose of manic but meaningful megahertz. Talk at 9 reflects the work of two men.
We both try and read the newspapers in the morning, get through as many of them as possible, and come up with what we can define as the issue of the day, if possible.
On 702. We're talking State of the Nation, triggered by the events surrounding that PAC funeral. We're talking future freedom of the press. We're talking violence as ever. We're talking one settler, one bullet. We're talking just who are African. Let's go to Liz from Sandown on 1. Liz, hello.
Hi, John.
You're on the air.
Thanks. Well, if it's, you know, one settler, one shot, you and I are both sort of down the drain.
Well, now, what does it mean?
We're both settlers here. And I think that the one thing that people do have to realize in this country is that we're here because we want to be here.
Right.
We of the PAC are saying the problem is settler colonialism and capitalism.
Right.
And the ANC says the problem is apartheid.
And another thing, one of the newspapers said that those right-wingers that marched in Pretoria were singing folk on their way to the Union building. Not at all. We were chanting things like Hangman Mandela.
Today, just 2 shops down from me, somebody was shot in cold blood.
My goodness.
I mean, what are we living in? Is it civil war or is it not civil war?
All right.
You know, you're too frightened to go out of your flat because you're going to be mugged. You can't go and do your shopping because somebody's going to put a knife to your throat. Who is actually going to do something about it?
All right, Cecilia, you've asked the question. Thank you.
Special guest. Some call it shock, others sleaze. An American radio innovation, shock radio, has only recently caught on in South Africa. In the factually based movie Talk Radio, DJ Alan Berg's life is endangered and finally taken by listeners opposed to his views.
You know, recently we've had some also nasty threats, so I'm beginning to think that radio is actually quite a dangerous job, especially, you know, the angle he's in at the moment.
My question to you, and I've spoken to you before, is that you do not profess to carry a British passport but an Irish passport.
You know, once somebody said of Puk Botha that Puk reminds him of an enraged porcupine. Now this character, Robbie, who's an ex-rugby player, reminds me of a barking little fox terrier. I don't like it.
The international press is curious. The BBC investigates.
What intrigues the British is this idea of a continual dialogue going on most nights of the week on the radio, across the racial divide, across political barriers in South Africa, especially as it's chaired by this former Irish rugby player. They wonder what's going on, and they wonder, I think, what black and white South Africans have to say to each other after 40-odd years of apartheid.
How far is too far? Only time will tell if Robbie's brand of dialogue will help bring South Africans together, or whether John Robbie is just another king of wishful thinking.